Hi, everyone. I want to thank this congregation and Lynn and Sean for inviting me to speak at the service today. I'm very honored. Just a little bit about myself. I've been attending First mainly online since the spring of 2021, and I've been one of those faceless Zoom accounts in the background, but I've been here. So this month's theme is love, and we just finished celebrating Valentine's Day. So I want to talk a bit about love and some of the complicated feelings I have about that word. And you might say that I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the word love. Love can mean so much. It's a huge word, and it's a huge word for Unitarians. Love is our doctrine. The word love, it invokes the transcendent. No matter what subject matter we explore, the road always seems to lead back to love, and that is a very good thing. And my mind, from time to time, it often goes back to the Beatles slogan, "All you need is love." And in the face of so many fears and challenges that I think we face in life and in the world, that sentiment can sometimes feel, loaded or troubling, or maybe it feel like it falls short of what that word love hopes to represent. Love is invoked in so many ways. It sometimes is called upon in advertising and pop culture. My mind imagines a piece of HomeSense decor with the slogan, "Live, laugh, love." Or a restaurant chain's new menu option for meat lovers or seafood lovers or this or that. And, there's nothing wrong with loving the food that you enjoy and that nourishes you. There's nothing wrong with wanting to decorate your home with words of positivity and gratitude and what you like. But I guess for me, the proliferation of that word love in the human culture, it can sometimes make love feel taken for granted as an ideal, rather than a real living symbol of the sacred and the life-changing encounter that word can bring. And sometimes love can be invoked in a way that puts pressure on us. Because love naturally calls to mind the highest aspirations of life, I think, love can also be a bomb dropped on a person. There's that sort of classic misuse of the phrase, if you loved me, you would do blank, all right? But in other ways, love can be a standard that can hang over our heads. And in my specific context, in my past, in the Roman Catholic Church, love was a loaded subject. Of course, we heard numerous passages of loving our enemies and loving one another as we are loved, and these were positive for me. But love, it was also a specific tool. That was it was a sort of a rhetoric tool used to kind of cajole better behavior. So, for example, there are passages where we're called to love God with all our soul and all our strength, right? And for people who are theistically minded, I think that's an understandable passage and virtuous sentiment. But the way it was enculturated in the community, it was not always the best. Love became a matter of willpower. It became a matter of determination, and it was a moral code in and of itself by which everything had to be externally evaluated. So in the realm of the human heart, that world we live in inside, love naturally and rightly so, it opens the door to the infinite of possibility. We can always love more. Theoretically, we can always be more loving and do more for the sake of love. And this infinity of potential that is in love, it's a gift. It is a sign of our freedom as spiritual and sentient beings, the infinite possibility for what life can offer in love. However, the way it ended up happening in some communities, such as the one I was engaged in the church, is that the message that was coming off was that we were never loving enough. And this, I think, is a struggle in I think a lot of our lives, is that sometimes we can feel like there's always harder to go, there's always more to do, and more need that is yet unmet. The world has so much need. And the end result sometimes might be that we burn out, that we have self-doubts, or frequent self-criticism that we go back to. And sometimes this can be a source of trauma. And ultimately, in our tireless pursuit of love, sometimes we can end up departing from the very center of love, what it's calling us back to. And yet, I must remember that whenever I think I understand love, whenever I think I understand as it really is, love always finds a way of being bigger than had I previously thought. My experience of love has paradoxically liberated me from previous limited beliefs about love. And it usually catches me off guard. It usually comes in my blind spots as a person. And, there are many incredible thinkers and spiritual writers and activists and leaders who have so many opinions and ideas about what loving looks like, and they all are incredible expressions of this potential for love. And even these amazing folks can express sentiments that for some may be a liberating view of love, and for others may be burdensome or limiting. While one aspect of love is its all-encompassing and universal nature, another dimension of love is also its ability to hold space, infinite space even, for the very unique and particular needs that each person must to live by their own terms. When one voice or image or perspective on love becomes the perspective on love, or becomes the dominant image or expression of love, we can paradoxically depart from the centering presence of love. And we are always called back to that center. When one group or one impulse or movement within the human society, within the human community, expresses a particular aspect or dimension of the fullness of love, there will be other sections of the human community that will pop up, and they will show us, like a mirror, the dimensions of love that we may not fully incorporate into our view, we may be neglecting, or we may not have a full view of. In this way, the entire human family is a self-regulating organism. And love continues to incorporate and encompass more and more those who inevitably get pushed out to the edges of a community's sphere of kinship, to the margins. We're always trying to incorporate again those who get pushed out. In today's reading by James Allison, James talks about the nature of being liked. It's interesting because he wrote about being liked, not loved. And in some ways, that strikes at things from a different angle. In the chapter he wrote that we read today, Confessions of a Former Marginaholic, James says that he was afraid to relax into himself because he thought if he did, his drive and desire to care for others would be diminished. The interesting thing about James was that he had always pushed himself to go to the margins, which was a good thing. He had joined the Dominican order, and he had worked in South America caring for AIDS patients, and he was constantly pushing himself to go to different places of need. Nevertheless, he felt that despite this giving of self, he struggled to feel fully present to the people that were in his care, he confesses in the book. And eventually, James came to believe that because of his struggle as a gay man, to like himself because of that inner struggle that he felt he couldn't like himself, or to see himself as likable, or to be able to be liked by others. He was not able to fully connect. Beneath the pressure and the business of his rush to those margins, James was struggling to step into the parts of himself, to rush to himself, that was not fully incorporating him into his loving center in the name of himself. The question of how we are, we're limited. We don't have infinite energy. We don't have infinite ability. We're finite in a way, right? This is related to the question of love. I believe fundamentally that human nature is inclined towards life-giving love. I do believe that. I believe I think that's in our bones. It's in our DNA. But, our finiteness and our tendency to get caught up in an idea about ourselves is a fundamental challenge that can make that loving, that growth in that love, both of ourselves and of others, it can make love seem maybe risky or dangerous. Many of us, we're inheriting a Western perspective on life. And that comes with a lot of its own expectations and assumptions about life, right? So for some, that perspective may come from the Protestant work ethic that is ingrained still in North American society, this hard-nosed determination to sacrifice oneself for duty, for family, country, community. For others, some of the Western perspective might appear in the skeptical tradition, where these impulses towards love or ideal might seem naive. Love as a word and as an ideal might seem like wishful thinking, or it might be too good to be true. There may be many of us who feel that hard work, happiness, and hope for the future might just be people trying to avoid the harsh reality of life, of a suffering world. What about the challenges? What about the dark side of life? And love can seem like something that is real, but is it enough to take on the cold, hard rock of material limitedness and finiteness? Is it enough? I think James Allison, I think he struggled with all these perspectives. And he respected each one of these objections or these perspectives in their own space. He respected them. But I think what James eventually had to realize in order to come to terms with his own confrontations in his life was that love is not a product of willpower. It's a place we arrive at. Love can't be conjured into being, for it already exists. It already surrounds us. I believe that love, which was defined by the scientist and theologian Teilhard de Chardin, he defined love as affinity from one for another. And that upheld the entire structure of being. That was the basic building block of all being, is that there was affinity of one for another. And just as one atom has affinity for another atom in that binding way, just as one lover has affinity for another person who's loved, we also have affinity toward ourselves. We are ourselves, and we cannot do anything more than be ourselves. It was when James was finally able to relax into himself, to like himself, that he could then be of real help to others in a new way. But this time the game had changed for him. So James mentioned that once he got out of the trap of being what he called a marginaholic, which he defines as thinking of himself needing to be discontented, needing to be marginalized, to be attentive to those on the margins, James felt that he was finally able to be curious and unthreatening and creative and playful in his work. He found new energy. He found authentic calling, and he found that sweet spot, I think, where his longing matched the need of the world, right? So I'm personally a big fan of feminist and Nietzschean psychotherapy. That is my particular focus in my therapy craft. And what I like about both the feminist and the Nietzschean way is that they often have a radical self-expression at their core. That's an important value. And both schools of thought see the inner person as having great value and potential when unburdened by the social expectations, by the spiritual and the intellectual prisons that can be of others' creations that we are put into. In this existential approach to therapy, and I myself have received existential therapy, there is a realization in each person that when you encounter healing, I think sometimes in therapy we realize that our inner desires and our impulses are not inherently wrong or selfish or dirty, but in fact good sources of life that help us come into the fuller joy of being. They propel us. The desire within, which can get tangled up with the expectations and the assumptions we carry, with our own trauma, it can get caught up with our woundedness and with the sort of the fog of life's mystery, right? That unfolding fog in front of us. Even though it gets caught up, that desire is in fact good, I think. That which you deeply yearn for is good, and it's ordered towards love and the fullness and the core of life. And we also have within us a fire to make our desire a reality. And that fire, that vitality, which is an act of love of self and of other, it is not a bad thing when it's held in the full breadth of the expansiveness of love, of our human response to the other. So it keeps the self-love in check with the other love, and the other love keeps the self-love in check. And in finding that balance, that fire is life-giving. And so James Allison believed that once he liked himself, he could be playful and creative. And that being at play, it's that thing we yearn for since childhood, playing. It's an expression of love to play. We're playing in the world that we are part of, the material world we're a part of. It's a good part about being in a body. And that play, that exercise of the self, that is what we need to propel us in our work and craft. That's where the effort goes. It's what satisfies us in our life trajectory. And when it's not satisfied, it lets us know that through boredom, through depression, through discontent, through many challenges. And it's letting us know, the body is letting us know, so we can find something and we can move on to that something where we can work, where we can play. And that playing helps those around us. And so, as we conclude, when we see the need in the world, there is that desire in us to respond, and that is a good thing. That is what it means to love, when there is that desire to respond. That is the very impulse that leads us to communion, and that's what brought us here today. And it's good that we're here. And it's good that we go out of here and we do something else with our life, or our time, or our play, or whatever. And so, in this loving communion with the whole world, the whole existence that we are a part of, let us go out and center ourselves in love. And maybe we can like ourselves too. May it be so.